Milford to talk with David Hansen, who is a realtor with Keller Williams in Milford, and we are interviewing him for our Ask the Expert series, as he is the expert in buying and selling homes in the area. So we're just going to get right into it. And so what we want to know is, what kind of market is it to buy a house right now?
Yeah, well, I think most people are pretty aware that it's a pretty hot seller's market right now, which is certainly true. It's prices are about as high as they've been in 10 years, which makes it difficult, combined with rising interest rates. It's a tough market now for buyers, especially in the lower price ranges. But on the other hand, the rising interest rates also serve to kind of artificially lower the prices, because the buyers can't afford as much, so the sellers are forced to bring their prices down. So most people think we're pretty close to the peak right now. We've been going up for a while. We might be kind of plateauing somewhere around there. It's difficult to say exactly, but it is a tough market for buyers right now. There's no denying.
Inventory too.
Inventory low, yes. It makes it so you've got a lot of buyers fighting for a few houses, which is always to the seller's advantage.
Okay, well, on that point, what advice can you give a buyer who finds the house of their dreams?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, and what I would say on that is, before you find the house of your dreams, you need to already have taken these steps. Because if you just go out and say, I'm going to buy a house, and you find the house of your dreams, you don't have any prep, you've got no chance, basically. So before you go find that house of your dreams, please talk with a lender, get your financing all squared away, know exactly how much you can afford, get that pre-approval in hand. Already have talked with a realtor, preferably have a relationship there, somebody who knows what your motivation is, what you're looking for, and then go find that dream house, because then when you find it, you're ready to slap down an offer right there, and you've got a fighting chance to get it. Whereas if you're just going into it cold, you've got no chance.
All right, well, that's great advice. What if the same house has other bids coming in?
Multiple offer situation is something we're certainly dealing with a lot these days. Best advice on that, kind of like I just mentioned, is already have your ducks all in a row. If you already have your financing taken care of, you can put in a strong offer right from the start. You're already financed, the lender said you're good to go. But then beyond that, I mean, there's a lot of things, I won't get into too many details, but beyond that, there are many ways to make an offer stand out. The price is one point, one line on a 5-page piece of paper. So there are many other things, such as the amount of money that the buyer is offering to the seller as an initial escrow payment. You could be flexible on closing date. You could say, hey seller, I'll close in 4 weeks, or I'll close in 6 months. If the buyer's flexible and he offers the seller that flexibility, that's a great opportunity to give yourself a leg up. So there's an entire blank paragraph on page 5 of the offer that's just, you can write in anything you want. Anything that you think the seller might appeal to the seller, the buyer can write it in. It's a good way to make your offer stand out.
Right, so being flexible certainly helps. Okay, if someone is looking to buy and sell a house at the same time, what advice can you give them to keep their sanity?
Yeah, well, it's never an easy thing or a fun thing necessarily when you're looking to sell a property and then turn that money and buy another home. The best advice I have on that would be, make sure you do it in the proper order. A lot of times we see people who go out and, like we just talked about, they find their dream house and then they go and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we love your house. Give us, a couple weeks because we need to put our house in the market. The house is going to be gone by that point. Nobody's going to do that. So your best bet is to list your home, get it active on the market. Ideally, it would already be under contract, and then you go find your own home. You talk to them, say you still have an uphill battle to fight, because you're still asking that seller to accept the additional risk, because you as a buyer have to sell your home first. So it's still, like I said, somewhat of an uphill battle, but as long as you have the order proper there and you've already got things taken care of with the house that you're trying to sell, that at least makes it as simple as possible for a seller to accept your offer.
So organization and timing seems to be critical. Okay. So in your years of experience as a real estate agent, what are the main reasons why a deal could fall apart?
Well, like I just mentioned, you mentioned the word flexibility. That's certainly one of them. There's many things that could cause a deal to fall apart that we can't control as a buyer or as an agent. Something from your past financial history pops up that nobody knew about, the deal's dead. Or it turns out that house needs $30,000 worth of work that nobody knew about once you go under contract, and nobody has the money to fix that. You can't control that. But the things you can control are flexibility. And if you go in and as a buyer and lay down the law and say, this is what I want, this is how it's going to go, and refuse to budge at all, as soon as one little tiny issue arises, the seller's just going to balk at that, and it's very possible for a deal to fall apart. And the other thing, kind of related to that, would actually be, I would say the word pride. If you go in, either the buyer or the buyer's agent, it says, we're going to win this deal. I'm not going to buy this house unless we get it for $10,000 less than asking price, and otherwise it's not a win for me, and I didn't feel like I came out on top of this deal. So don't go into it. I mean, obviously you're trying to win to a certain extent. If you buy the house, it's a win. But be flexible, and realize that there's going to be some give and take there. And as long as the seller who wants to sell is able to do that, and you who want to buy can come together, then hey, let's get it done.
All right, that's great advice. So why should a buyer use a real estate agent? We know there's lots of options online and everything is promoting just do it yourself. Why should someone want to spend the money on a real estate agent?
Well, I'm glad you phrased it like that. First of all, most real estate agents don't charge you for the buyer agency services. The seller is offering a fee to an agent who brings a buyer to them and helps them in the process. So 98% of the time, I'm just throwing out a wild number there, but let's say 98% of buyer's agents are not going to charge you for their services. So they might help you look for a house for 2 years and show you 40 homes and write up 16 offers, and none of that's going to cost you a thing until you're finally able to close on a home. But beyond that, there are, I think the number is 531 individual steps that a realtor is going to take during the course of a transaction. So if you as a buyer are prepared to handle all 531 of those on your own and deal with all the paperwork and the deadlines and the inspectors and appraisers and all the different people you have to deal with, knowing that if you miss a single deadline, you're going to lose your deposit and the seller can kick you out, then that's fine. People do it all the time. You can manage your own sale, but for most people, they don't want to do that. And if you can get a professional who does this full time for free to serve you and be fully committed to you, it certainly seems like it makes sense to me.
There's certainly more moving pieces than you'd expect in buying and selling a house, no doubt.
It's the most important transaction most people will make in their lives. So why wouldn't you hire somebody who does nothing except help people in that exact process?
Exactly. Okay. And lastly, why should a buyer use a reputable and local businesses when moving forward purchasing a home?
I'm a huge fan of encouraging people to use somebody local, whether it's a lender, somebody that you can go and sit down with, and it's not just a random 1-800 number, or somebody who you call them and say, okay, let me look up your file number and all that sort of stuff. So whether it's insurance or home insurance or anything like that, the lender, being able to go and have somebody that you know, hey, Judy, I got a question here, and they know who you are. My wife and I use HPM for our insurance. We've got both a car and home, and knowing that we can just email somebody and I'm probably going to get a response back within 15 minutes is huge, and especially when you're trying to buy a home. Deadlines are hugely important. Just this morning, I tried to call somebody at 8:30, but they're on the Pacific Coast, so I had to wait until 11 o'clock to call them again. So that time zone difference right there can make a huge difference if you're trying to do a deal. So work with somebody local, whatever the person is. There's a huge advantage to having somebody right there that you know and they know you.
Awesome. Well, great advice. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule.
Absolutely.
And thanks a lot.